Murders of that beloved Hollywood couple, Rob and Michelle Reiner. And
Rob Reiner's name hit the headlines fast. Not for a film, not for a speech, but for a crime scene. Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were found dead in their Los Angeles home on the 14th of December 2025. Within hours, their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested. 2 counts of murder.
Reiner was handcuffed and arrested. The LAPD Gang and Narcotics Unit posted the since.
Life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. No decision at this point has been made.
No bail. An arraignment set for the 7th of January 2026.
I got back on dope and other things. And to make a really long story short, I wound up having a cocaine heart attack.
Those facts moved quickly. The conversation did not. There was no motive released. No detailed evidence explained. No public narrative beyond dates and charges. Silence followed certainty. That silence matters because in cases like this, quiet is not neutral. It is a decision. Family statements asked for privacy. Officials stayed measured. Hollywood stayed careful. Analysis begins where information stops. When facts are confirmed but context is withheld, someone controls the pace. So the question isn't what happened. It's why so little has been said since. That choice demands scrutiny. Rob Reiner was known as a man who never stayed quiet. He argued, he confronted, he challenged power in public. For decades, Hollywood framed him as fearless. A director with opinions. A voice that pushed back. That image mattered. It protected credibility. It built authority. Michelle Singer Reiner lived differently in public. Less visible. More private. Rarely part of controversy. Together they appeared controlled. Stable, untouchable. That framing shaped expectations. When tragedy hit, people expected noise. Statements, explanations, something human and immediate. Instead, restraint took over. Confirmed facts were released. Dates, charges, custody. Then nothing else followed. No emotional narrative formed. No larger explanation filled the gaps. Only silence and careful wording. This contrast is the fracture. A man defined by speaking out. A moment defined by saying less. Public image promised confrontation. Reality delivered caution. Fans felt the imbalance. Observers noticed the pause. Media coverage slowed. Language softened. Focus narrowed to procedure. This wasn't chaos. It was containment. Measured, deliberate, and containment always raises one final doubt. When reputations collapse, control replaces emotion. When stories break, silence edits memory. That pattern demands attention. It always has. So which image survived, and who decided what the public heard in end? The 14th of December 2025 changed everything. Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner were found dead inside their Los Angeles home. The discovery triggered an immediate homicide investigation. Police moved fast. The response was urgent. The classification was clear. What followed felt different. Within the same day, Rob Reiner's son, Nick Reiner, was arrested. Charges came quickly. 2 counts of murder. A special circumstance allegation. Custody without bail. An arraignment date set weeks ahead. Procedurally, nothing stalled. Publicly, everything slowed. There were no extended briefings. No evolving explanations. No narrative beyond confirmation. Information arrived in short bursts, then stopped. The speed of law enforcement did not match the pace of public clarity. This is where perception shifted. In high-profile cases, Escalation usually follows arrest. Speculation fills gaps. Experts appear. Questions multiply. Here, restraint replaced urgency. Coverage tightened. Language narrowed. Discussion became careful. That restraint framed the moment. Family statements asked for privacy. Officials shared only what was required. Media outlets echoed the same limited facts. Analysis became cautious. Emotion was delayed. The shift wasn't subtle. It was structural. A tragedy that should have expanded outward instead collapsed inward. Attention narrowed. Curiosity stalled. Silence settled in around confirmed facts. This moment matters because it set the rules. What would be said? What would wait? What would never be addressed publicly? Once a narrative slows, it rarely speeds up again. Control replaces chaos. Memory becomes managed. So the question remains unavoidable. Was December 14 the moment everything snapped? Or moment story was contained publicly? Facts came first. 7 of them, each confirmed, each uncomfortable. Detail 1 was medical. The medical examiner listed multiple sharp force injuries. No ambiguity, no qualifiers, just cause of death. Detail 2 was timing. Death certificates showed both deaths occurred within minutes, not hours, not a prolonged emergency. Minutes matter in investigations. Detail 3 was discovery. Rob Reiner reportedly found her father. A 911 call followed. The sequence was brief. The shock, immediate. Detail 4 was speed. Nick Reiner was arrested the same day. No delay. No prolonged search. Immediate custody. Detail 5 was the charge. 2 counts of murder. Not 1, 2, with a special circumstance allegation of multiple murders. Detail 6 was confinement. Nick Reiner was held without bail. Reporting noted suicide watch and solitary conditions. The posture was serious, restrictive. Detail 7 was silence. Rob Reiner and Jake Reiner issued statements. They asked for privacy. They announced memorial details would follow later. They said little else. These details are not rumor. They come from official documents and verified reporting. They are the fixed points. What is striking is not what these facts say. It is what they do not explain. No motive. No evidence narrative. No reconstruction of events. Receipts matter because patterns begin with certainty. When facts are this clear, hesitation becomes visible. Each detail confirms severity. Together, they justify urgency. Yet urgency did not expand publicly. Discussion narrowed. Context stalled. These early receipts did their job. They established reality. They also revealed restraint. So the question sharpens. How many confirmed details does it take before silence feels intentional? This section does not speculate. It documents weight. It shows pressure without guessing. And it sets the stage for what comes next, when absence itself becomes evidence, and silence starts asking questions no statement ever answers publicly. What wasn't released became the story. There was no stated motive, no public explanation of what led to the violence, no description of how events unfolded inside the home. Officials confirmed deaths and charges, then stopped. That gap matters. In cases with this level of severity, details usually expand. Timelines grow clearer. Evidence gets summarized. Context is offered to explain risk. Here, context stayed locked. The absence was consistent. Law enforcement shared only required language. The district attorney filed charges, then went quiet. No speculation, no framing, no narrative beyond procedure. Family responses followed the same pattern. Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner released statements. They asked for privacy. They avoided detail. They avoided explanation. That choice is understandable. It is also consequential. Silence shapes perception. It slows curiosity. It narrows debate. It limits pressure. Media coverage reflected that restraint. Articles repeated the same facts. Headlines stayed cautious. Language softened instead of escalating. Nothing here proves intent. Nothing confirms avoidance. But patterns do not need accusations to be visible. When information stops at the same point across institutions, restraint becomes coordinated in effect, even if not in design. The result is the same. Questions are delayed. Narratives stall. This is where analysis replaces reporting. Not because facts are missing, but because context is withheld. The case moved forward legally. It paused socially. That imbalance is the pressure point. When tragedy meets legacy, risk calculations change. Speaking carries consequences. Silence feels safer, but safety has a cost. It transfers uncertainty to the public. It turns absence into speculation. This is where receipts end and interpretation begins. Not with claims, with gaps. And the question becomes harder to ignore. Was silence chosen to protect people or to protect something larger? The reaction split almost immediately. Some people demanded restraint. They pointed to grief. They pointed to privacy. They argued that tragedy should not become spectacle. Others felt something else: unease, suspicion, a sense that the story stopped too early. Two sides formed without being named. One side focused on process. Charges were filed. A court date was set. They argued that nothing more was owed. The other side focused on absence. No motive, no explanation, no broader context. That absence felt loud. Online discussion reflected the divide. Comments argued over tone, over timing, over what was appropriate to ask. Some accused critics of exploiting pain. Others accused defenders of protecting legacy. Media framing reinforced the split. Coverage stayed careful. Headlines repeated official language. Very few asked deeper questions. That caution shaped perception. To some, it looked respectful. To others, it looked managed. The divide wasn't about facts. Facts were agreed upon. Deaths occurred. Charges were filed. The divide was about meaning. What does the public deserve to know? When does privacy outweigh accountability? Who decides when questions become inappropriate? Rob Reiner's legacy complicated everything. So did the family connection. So did Hollywood's long memory. People didn't just argue about the case. They argued about boundaries, about power, about who gets shielded when stories turn dark. And that is why the audience split mattered. It revealed something deeper than opinion. It revealed instinct. Some people protect silence. Others challenge it. So the question sharpens again. Who are people really defending when they choose a side? The shift didn't happen loudly. It happened quietly, almost politely. Headlines changed tone. Language softened. Urgency faded. What once read as shocking began to read as procedural. Dates replaced emotion. Charges replaced questions. Then, old material resurfaced. Interviews, speeches, moments where Rob Reiner spoke about responsibility and accountability. Viewed again, they felt different. Not wrong, just heavier. Context changed meaning. Confidence sounded firmer. Conviction sounded sharper. Words that once felt righteous now carried weight. This is how image collapses. Not through scandal, through contrast. A public figure built on speaking out. A final chapter defined by restraint. Trust doesn't disappear instantly. It erodes. Slowly, quietly. People began to rewatch, not to accuse, but to reassess. To test memory against reality. To measure expectation against outcome. The collapse wasn't about guilt. It was about consistency. When a legacy promises confrontation, silence feels like absence. When an image sells clarity, restraint feels incomplete. Hollywood understands this instinctively. Images survive on alignment. When alignment breaks, control follows. No statements corrected the imbalance. No interviews reframed it. The image was left suspended. That suspension mattered. It allowed doubt to exist without being named. It let questions linger without answers. It shifted trust without declaring betrayal. Nothing here proves wrongdoing, but collapse doesn't require proof. It requires mismatch. Once perception fractures, it never fully resets. It only reorganizes. And the question remains, if the image couldn't hold under pressure, was it ever real at all? Damage control does not always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like restraint. There were no press conferences, no extended statements, no narrative push, only confirmation. Then distance. Legal language stayed tight. Charges were named. Procedures were outlined. Nothing more. That approach limits risk. It avoids missteps. It prevents contradiction. Family statements followed the same line. Brief, careful, focused on privacy. They did not expand. They did not explain. They did not invite discussion. That absence shapes the field. Without new information, conversation stalls. Without commentary, pressure dissipates. Media coverage adjusted accordingly. Reports repeated known facts. Headlines softened. Speculation was avoided. This is how control functions. Not by denial, by narrowing the frame. Questions become inappropriate. Curiosity feels intrusive. Silence gains moral cover. Nothing here confirms coordination. Nothing proves intent. But effect matters more than motive. The effect was containment. Attention faded. Debate slowed. Urgency dissolved into waiting. Waiting favors institutions. Waiting protects reputations. Waiting moves judgment into the future. But control has consequences. It leaves gaps unaddressed. It shifts burden to the audience. People fill silence differently. Some respect it, others question it. And that division hardens. Because when truth is delayed, trust erodes quietly. And when silence becomes strategy, accountability feels optional. So the question returns, sharper now. Was this restraint about protecting truth or protecting control? After the headlines faded, consequences remained. Not public ones, private ones. A family lost 2 parents at once and gained a courtroom future. Nothing prepares anyone for that shift. Rob Reiner and Jake Reiner asked for privacy. That request carried weight. It also marked withdrawal. Public life stopped. Normal routines ended. Grief became structured around statements and dates. Nick Reiner remained in custody, held without bail, waiting for arraignment. Waiting became the new reality. Legally, the process moved forward. Slow, deliberate, unemotional. Socially, everything stalled. There were no public reconciliations, no clarifying conversations, no reframing of events. Relationships changed without explanation. Public distance replaced familiarity. Silence replaced access. Hollywood responded quietly. No industry reckoning, No visible fallout, just absence. That absence is an outcome. It reshapes memory. It defines legacy. Rob Reiner's career did not disappear, but it froze in time. A body of work now carries a final shadow. Tragedy does that. It alters context permanently. The cost is not only emotional, it is reputational, historical, unavoidable. People remember endings more than beginnings. They remember unresolved stories more than complete ones. This aftermath was not explosive. It was quiet, measured, lingering. And lingering consequences are the hardest to process. They don't offer closure. They don't resolve debate. They sit. So the real price wasn't paid in headlines. It was paid in distance, in silence, in futures rewritten without public explanation. And that leaves one final question. Who paid the real price when the story stopped being told? Stories like this never end cleanly. They pause. They wait. Rob Reiner's case exposed a familiar pattern. Confirmed facts, limited explanation, institutional quiet. This isn't unique. Family tragedy, legal process, silence wrapped in respect. When answers are delayed, memory gets edited. What's remembered becomes selective. What's questioned becomes impolite. That matters now, because other stories follow the same arc, the same pressure to move on. This case sits inside a larger habit. Protect the frame. Avoid escalation. Let time soften impact. Nothing here proves coordination. Nothing claims conspiracy. But patterns don't need intention to repeat. The next reveal isn't about this case alone. It's about who speaks, who waits, and who benefits from delay. If silence works once, it works again. That's why this moment matters. Not for closure, but for recognition. Because when stories stop early, they don't disappear. They resurface. They connect. And this one isn't over. Yet.